Hey everyone. Due to the turmoil in our world over the subject of racism, we're going to take a slight detour off what we've been studying. And I say only a slight detour because we've been in the book of Luke, and our goal has been to fix our eyes on Jesus. Now, last week, we're at the end of chapter 3, and there's a couple of things that happened. Number one, we looked at the baptism of Jesus and then the genealogy of Jesus. And what we said is that Jesus is being shown for who he is. That's what Luke is wanting to do. He's wanting to show you who he is before you watch what he does and you listen to what he says. And he's, first of all, in the baptism, revealed as the Son of God. In other words, he's the second person of the Trinity. He's the communication of God. And what Luke is wanting you to see is from now on, when you're watching him, you're watching truth personified. Truth personified. So what he does, what he says, how he reacts, how he relates to people, it's all important, and it's revealing truth about who God is to us. Then it does the genealogy, and the genealogy is showing that he's fully man. It goes all the way back to Adam. Well, when it comes to this issue of racism, we need to fix our eyes on Jesus because it's revealing who God is. You know, Jesus was known as he was walking around as the truth personified. He was someone who reached out to those that people in his day thought he shouldn't reach out to. He was known for breaking through social barriers. They had their own forms of racism in his day, and he broke through those barriers as a matter of lifestyle. He reached out to all kinds of people, from the top of the socioeconomic status all the way to the bottom and everything in between. And then he formed a movement that he commissioned us all to reach all nations. He said, make disciples of all nations. And that means all people groups. I heard one historian say that the early Christian church was the most egalitarian movement the world had ever seen. In other words, they created space at the table for everyone in radical ways like no one had ever seen before. That's Jesus' movement. And when it comes to this whole issue of racism, that's our heritage, and that's what we ought to be doing. So as we're trying to process this as Christ-following people, we need to follow Jesus' example. And so we've been challenging you to do 3 things. Number 1, fix your eyes on Jesus. Number 2, pray for greater understanding in your love and discernment. And number 3, listen. We want to go on a journey of listening. Well, today, we want to give you an opportunity to do that. We have a series on our podcast, but today we also want to just take a Sunday to listen to a friend of mine. His name is Keith. He's a pastor here in our area, and I want to invite you just to listen to his perspective on this issue. Well, Keith, thank you very, very, very much for being here. And just being here is, I want to call you like a coach for all of us as we're dealing with this issue in our country. And you've always been so gracious to me with answering questions and things. And before we get into all that, though, I would like for people to get to know you a little bit, who you are, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. My name's Keith Patterson. I am one of the associates at Zion Missionary Baptist Church. Dr. R.V. Terry is actually the pastor there, and so I'm one of the associates there at Zion Missionary Baptist Church. And I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, and pretty much most of my adult life I've been living in Durham, North Carolina, where I went to school at North Carolina Central. And after graduating, kind of took a career in law enforcement and was a special agent with Department of Crime Control and Public Safety in the state of North Carolina.
Wow, that seems relevant.
Yeah, well,
with all what's going on right now.
Yeah, well, it helps, and what I mean by that is that when you see things and you know the training that you've had, and when you see things that are not right, then there's probably no police officer that's alive that would say anything that they saw, in that video was part of training. None of that is a part of training.
So you've got a whole nother layer just with this, but with your law enforcement training. And so that's interesting to note.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah.
So, well, with that, I want us to jump right in because all of this has obviously got everyone's attention. And in a predominantly white congregation, we're on the edge of our seats, and our challenge to our congregation has been to listen. We're just here to listen. We want to hear what we're not hearing. And so I want to let you just, what would you implore the white community to do now?
the main thing I would say is pray first. I think we have to start everything with prayer, right? And so as we sit at the foot of Jesus, we need to, ask, what is it that we could be doing, or what else should we be doing at this time? And one of the main things that I would say is just, if you look at the white community, I would say just empathize, understand what's going on, ask questions. To me, there's no harm in asking questions if you don't understand. I don't think someone should totally be ignorant of a situation or what's going on right now. And I would just say that be that voice, for the Black community. I think I alluded to it the last time I was here in the podcast that it's going to take the voice of white America to help change things. That the Black America has been marching and doing peaceful protests for a long, long, long time, and sometimes you wonder if their voice is heard. And a lot of times, because of the frustration and anger that we're seeing now, the perception is no, our voice haven't been heard. And so, that was kind of my call, is to even with all of the white friends that I have, I was like, hey, I need your voice. It's time to speak up. If you see injustices, it's time to speak up. It's time that you utilize your voice, do something. Try to figure out what it is that you can do. There's a comedian. I was listening to a comedian, and he of course he was, trying to get the laugh, but he said, I think every, white person should have a Black friend, and every Black person should have a white friend. And even though, there was the joke in that, but I think there's some truth to that, I think because of those relationships, then when things happen, there's a lot more of the empathy, or there's a lot more of understanding, because you've built a relationship with the person, and now you're able to actually, okay, when something like this arises, and you can go to that person and say, hey man, how do you feel about this? And they can give you the unadulterated truth without the sugarcoating, without all of the missing pieces, and say, hey, this is how I feel about this, and this is why I feel about this. And it just goes to that respect part of being able to understand and listen, that part of communication that, when you open up to listen and have respect for what people are saying, then I think that's going to be the key in all of that.
Yeah. And you were able to do that for me when all this rose up. So thank you.
Yeah. I want to say, one of the major things right now that I think we can do as a country, especially with what's going on right now, is just coming together and understand that this that we're going through was not an isolated incident, or the rage or the anger that the Black community has right now is not just George Floyd. It's not just George Floyd. It's a combination of years and years and years, hundreds of years, things that have happened over the years, and it's things that have happened that if you have some personal story to share, that you might have been involved in some type of racist act, or some type of racism was against you, and all of those things are building up, where they have their personal stories. They have these stories that they've seen before. They have the Sandra Bland's, they have the Breonna Taylors, they have the Ahmaud Arbery's. They have all of these stories, and you have all of these incidents, and then when these people, these officers or these people are brought to justice, they're charged or they are arrested, and right now, there's talking to community, or it won't be a conviction, because the conviction never comes. And so in the Black community, we know that now that the officer's been charged, we've seen that before.
Right.
And by the time he gets to court, right now there's doubt that this will lead to a conviction of those actual charges, because in the past, usually every officer that's been in an officer-involved shooting of an unarmed black man are usually acquitted for those charges.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I think that has the black community in such a uproar, or they're angry and they're frustrated, and that's why there's the peaceful protests and the marches, and there's the, we're tired of the black men being killed, because they've seen that same scenario over and over and over and over, and now it's just like after a while you can't hold it; it just starts to spill over, and so.
Yeah.
And that's where you see some of the frustration and anger right now.
Well, and speaking of this, inside the black community, okay, you're talking to a predominantly white audience and directly, but let us be a fly on the wall of the discussions that are going on inside the black community. You just alluded to it a little bit, but flesh that out a little bit more. What's the conversation like in there?
Well, to be blunt, it is right now that nothing's going to happen.
Okay.
Will white America understand? I think, for me personally, I think this last situation has brought more attention and I think more awareness than any of the other previous ones. And I wonder, because that it has brought the attention, why is this one different from the others,
Right.
But this particular one, I think there's always been video in the past. There's been video of situations where unarmed black men are being killed. And so part of my question is why is the white community now saying, okay, we got to do something? Is it because it was for 9 minutes and they got to see for 9 minutes a struggling man go through that process before he died? And you just, you wonder, because usually with the other instances, there's a shooting, and so it's a faster process. It's not over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And so you have to watch him slowly. If you've watched the video, and I don't know if you have from the beginning to end, you just slowly watched him for 9 minutes expire with the officer's knee on his knee.
Yeah, and he's speaking too, and he's talking, he's asking for help, and then the people around him are saying, and so the combination of all of that is just very bracing. I don't remember ever seeing anything quite like it, in anywhere, So that has a very dramatic effect, and maybe it has something to it beyond shootings, which sounds like a weird distinction to make, but
and he's, one of the things that I think struck me the most is after I learned this is that he was yelling out for his mother. A couple times he's yelling for his mother, and his mother has been deceased 2 years. Actually, she died. They said 2 years on the same day he died. And you're like, if you're yelling out, you have to be in distress to be yelling for someone that that's already deceased. Yeah. And so I think that touched me even more when you see him going through the agony and all of that. And so it's interesting now to see the awakening now of the country. I kind of, you don't like this, but we say, oh, now you're in this situation, let's make some good out of it. And so that's why I'm here. So, you have questions you're asking, there are people in the white community that are asking, like, what can I do? How can I help? Oh, I didn't know this was happening. And for us as in the black community, we're like, this has been happening for years. So this is not new to us. Right. This has been going on for years and years and years. And so I think with the cell phones and technology, it starts to bring it to the forefront a little bit more. And so,
because that was a thought that kind of braced me even more was that what that means is the technology has provided the ability to see But then I thought, my goodness, how much technology has missed through the years.
Right.
And that was the one that really just kind of got me on a whole different level.
Right.
And in that case, this is a terrible stat. I heard a speaker one time say that every person has an average of 3.4 blind spots in their life, blind spots. Mm-hmm. So in other words, there are things that you don't recognize about yourself that other people clearly see, which is a really, really scary thought. So just all of us do. They said that on average we do. So when it comes to, it's obvious that the white community has blind spots. And you've kind of taken the lid off those a little bit, but what are the blind spots that you think we do have? And it's fine. I mean, we're asking. Right. So what are those blind spots from your vantage point? As you're like, this is obvious, but you guys, it literally is a blind spot.
Right. And I would say the biggest blind spot is the empathy, the recognition of what we in the Black community call white privilege. There's in our mind that, they're not in our mind, but what we can see, that what happens to me is going to be different that happens to you. And the whole reason that it's going to happen differently for me and for you is because I'm Black and you're white. And to use that white privilege to the advantage, I think I alluded to it on the podcast, is that when Dr. King did his March on Washington, there was, maybe 250,000 people there, but it wasn't until he got the white community behind, or and to get more of the white community to use what he was having them use as their voice. White America understands white America's voice. Right. You think, if you can go back as far as time as you can remember, Blacks have protested and marched for a long time for all different types of things. Yeah. But it's not until you can get the white community involved and hear their voice where we feel like there's some change being affected. And so that was one of my calls. Hey, white community, if you're my friend, use your voice. Use your voice to speak up at this time. Use your privilege. Your privilege is going to allow you to be heard, whereas I might not be heard. And privilege is important, at least for you. And part of it is recognizing. I've heard people say, you had the same opportunities that I have. Well, maybe. Depends, right? Right. So I think one of the things I share with you is that if we just look at it from a systemic standpoint, as we have a Black person, white person, they both commit armed robbery, they get charged with armed robbery, they both go to court. Well, the white person that we know get 2.5 months of probation, where the black man gets 26 years in prison. They got the same crime, the same age. Why is there this huge gap in this sentencing? Why is that? And a lot of that is not only the privilege of each person, but the privilege of the system, the how white America views white America and how white America views Black America. One of the ones that I think should have highlighted privilege like none other was the Amy Cooper story. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That's where there was a white female. She was going through the park in New York with her dog off the leash. And there was a Black guy that does bird watching. And so he asked her, because the dogs would mess up the bird watching, he asked her to put the dog on a leash. And it got confrontational. And you can see as he recorded, she walks up on him and she clearly says, hey, I'm gonna tell the police that an African-American man is threatening my life. She knew at that point, when she said that, she knew what that meant to her, and she knew what that meant to him, that if she said, as a white female, that an African-American man is threatening my life, then he knew he was gonna be in trouble. She knew he was gonna be in trouble. And that's the power of, if I can explain it, that privilege, that when you have it. She knew she had it, and she knew how to use it. And so, just in using it in that negative tone, we have to also just turn it around and use it for positive. Your voice, you're just speaking out when you see injustices being done. in the peaceful protest. I was a part of the protest this past Saturday in Evansville, very peaceful, and I was amazed to see so many white people there. It was amazing, right, that they came to support, right, and so it was a beautiful thing to start to see this coming together of people. Now it's just okay. You got the attention. So how are you going to use your privilege? What are you going to do to exercise your voice? What actions are you going to take to exercise your privilege or exercise your voice? What are you going to do?
Yeah, what helped me with the whole privilege discussion, and it was a blind spot for me because I don't think of my life in those terms. I do in the sense of where I live in my country, and I'm blessed, and I've got to travel to foreign countries and things like that have enlightened me to the privilege that I have as an American and those kinds of things. But someone put it to me this way, and maybe this will relate to some. My race has never caused an adverse effect in my life. That's the privilege that I have as a baseline, right. Whereas yours has.
Right.
It's something that's a thing that you have to overcome. I've never even had to think about it in this environment, in this culture, and so that helped me to kind of that makes sense to me. Like, wow, I had never thought of that. It's just an issue that I don't have to deal with as a normal part of life. I have my other challenges, I have my other issues, right. But that's not one of them, right. and it would be a burden to bear. And that brings us to kind of the question of, we hear the term like systemic racism. What are examples that, again, talking about blind spots, what are examples that you could help us see that maybe we don't see, that you see all the time, it's easy to see, and I just wouldn't because I'm walking through my life not noticing?
All right. So, I alluded to it earlier, probably I think the biggest systemic part of the racism of this country is the encounters that we have, with an officer. My encounter and your encounter is going to be different. If I get pulled over by the police, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hands on the steering wheel, and I'm not going to move until he gives me some instruction. That's it. For you, you might be, doing whatever you're doing in a car. You know what I'm saying? So, and a part of that understanding of that is that this officer perceives me as a threat, and a part of that is he sees me as a threat because in the Black community we are known, or what we know is we're considered the angry Black men, and so what we don't ever want to be is the angry Black man. So we don't want to be the angry Black woman. We don't want to have that perception. And so if we have that perception, then we know there's going to be some adverse effects of that. So right. You try to avoid that. And so we know that because we're perceived that way, there's already, that is a part of that system that starts with your interactions probably with the police. And then if the police officer has that view of you, then the judge might have that view of you. The prosecutor might have that view of you. So everybody has these different views of you as this person. I would not dare to ask if you saw, other than if you had met me or if you saw me out, because every now and again I won't look like this. I might have my Jordans on, I might have my hat on, I might, what I'm saying? And sometimes if I'm like this, right. The perception is different. Other than like if I'm dressed a little different, I have my jeans on, someone might perceive me as a threat, or right. Okay. They might look at me and say, oh yeah, he might be doing this or he might be doing that. And it's just what we know is always been. And so we always try to make sure, at least, I'm not speaking for everybody, at least for me, I always try to make sure how I'm perceived or the perception that I have.
But you have a conscious thing that you have to go through to think about the perception, whereas right. I don't. I first of all, I know I don't look like a threat, but it's funny, but it's also true. Just right. kind of walking about it in our culture, right. But I don't have to intentionally process through that information, which sounds foreign to me to even have to do that. But that's a reality you have to live with as life every
Right.
day. Just kind of thinking about, okay, if I wear this, I'll be perceived one way, and people will be looking at me in a way that they shouldn't. But it's present,
Right.
if that makes sense. And
Right.
so, and that's something we all need to be conscious of. Imagine just it's the intentional things in our minds that many of us don't have to process through. When it comes to just we're talking about fixing our eyes on Jesus here, and during all this with COVID-19 and with the racism question, what I'm pushing our congregation to do is to really fix our eyes on who Jesus is, what he's about, and relearning that. Even if we think we learn it, we need to relearn it. When it comes to this issue, and even from within the Black community, as you look to Christ himself, what encourages you? What do you take from his model, and what would you use to kind of preach a little bit to to all of us, or maybe a lot? It's okay. That's all right.
Well, first off, Jesus is our model, and as every Christian believer, we should have Jesus out in front of us as our model for what we should be doing from day to day. That includes loving your neighbor, even loving your enemy. So when I think about that, if I am following Jesus, then there shouldn't be any room for any outside interferences. There shouldn't be any way that anything can get in to stop me from believing and going forth in whatever my mission that Jesus has me on. And I'm reminded of when Jesus was in the wilderness with Satan. He was in the wilderness for 40 days, and at that time, he comes out. He's led by the Spirit. He comes out, and you have Jesus, the man, and you have Jesus, the God. And so here you have these two entities in this one man, and Satan is trying to go after, and no doubt, the man, because he can't conquer the spirit. So he's going after the man, and he's tempting him with all these things. He knows he's hungry. He knows he's thirsty, and so he's tempting him with all of these things. And he takes him and let him see the world and see all these kingdoms. And he's probably putting a big old glass of ice water sitting there. Jesus is probably just thirsty, and he's got all this lavish food laying out for him to see it, and he's wanting it. And I think in my mind that when Jesus came out of that whole situation, when Satan tempted him with everything he could, and Jesus didn't break. Right? And yeah. He didn't break. He wasn't allowed. Satan had to flee because he couldn't tempt him. And there was no doubt in my mind that when Jesus came out of the man side, the human side of him, had that aha moment, like, I can accomplish, I can do anything with the spirit of Jesus Christ. And in my mind, we have to be the same way, right? Satan is going to tempt us. He's going to distract us. He's going to let us see things. He's going to help us to, or cause us to deflect. When someone asks a question about this, and there's some people now saying that might be watching is like, I might not totally believe in. He probably haven't experienced this, or he don't, this, or they may still have some doubts in their minds about things, and that's the work of the enemy, causing the deflections. And we can't allow Satan to tempt us with these things. And so we have to be like Jesus. We have to have that aha moment and say, okay, this has happened. These things have happened, but now we have the opportunity. I've been doing things this way. I've been believing this way. But now I have this aha moment. There's someone that's actually telling me that if I believe like this, then that's probably a racial belief, or right. I might not be a racist, but I've had some racial undertones before, or I've done this before, or I believe, or I didn't realize that this privilege I had was what it was, and that I was using it. Some people are aware, but we can't allow Satan to continue to tempt us with those things, and we have to keep resisting. And we know that when we resist, he flees. And at the end, we know that Jesus was learning and searching himself. He was learning himself. And I think at that moment when he came down out of the wilderness, he was like, okay, I'm ready now. He's ready to go do ministry now, because he had just defeated at that point. Satan was already defeated at that point. There was nothing Satan could do. At least on the human side, was nothing he could do anyway from the beginning. But I'm talking about the human side of Jesus, how he's probably perceiving things, or how he's dealing with these things. And so we have to have that same mindset that now that we have this information, that we have to go forth and start our ministry, a new ministry in racial reconciliation. Whether that means you might have to get out of your comfort zone. Man, talking about racism is the most uncomfortable conversation you can have. You
I'm
know,
glad
right?
we're here.
Right? So, and it's hard, and I think you have to come with understanding. You can't come with deflection. You can't come with your past, your guilts and things like that. You have to let all that stuff aside, and you have to go with an open heart, and to say, okay, I'm gonna go to this person, or I'm gonna do this, and it's solely out of respect for that person. If nothing else, out of respect for him as he's a Christian. If we're talking about believers, that when whatever effort you're making, that it should be Christ-led, right? And so, I just believe that as we push through our ministry, push through our work, that we have to not allow these things that Satan's going to tempt us with, like now, with all of the riots and the protests, and I meant not the protests itself, but the rioting and the looting. It's a sidetrack. It's a sidetrack from Satan. Satan is getting us off of the main issue here. The main issue is racial reconciliation. There's been some injustices done for a long time. Let's start working on that. But all of these things, Satan, he's good at what he does. That's why he's been doing it for so long. He's good at it. He's really good at what he does, and he knows how to distract. He knows how to tempt. He knows how, and we have to use the authority that Jesus Christ gave us through our Holy Spirit, and that is to be able to. We have the authority to defeat Satan, to keep him under our feet. We have that authority. We just have to exercise our authority, and that authority comes in through our spirit, not just with Satan, but as we go through life with each other. We have to still exercise our authority, even when we have the uncomfortable conversations about race, and just be respectful of, and be willing to have an open heart, and be willing to understand and listen. That's some of the main. That's like communication, right?
Exactly.
Just listen.
Well, and I appreciate you modeling that, because what I've heard you say, and I hope everybody can kind of walk away with this sense of, one, I can have the conversation, and I thought I heard you say basically, it's okay if you have a person of color in your life to say, hey, give me some coaching here,
right?
And that wouldn't be a bad thing to do,
right.
And then as we kind of go through that and enlighten on that, we are ready to go forward in ministry, because what's digging around in me as a pastor at One Life, and it is to, my biggest fear is that the emotion will rise and the headlines will be there, and then they'll go away, because we all know it'll go away. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to miss the opportunity that we have to onboard to a whole new world, because I think our generation can make some serious progress. I don't think we can solve the problem altogether, but I think we can make progress that my grandkids can enjoy and your grandkids can enjoy. I think that's very, very possible, especially starting right here in our local community. And because we say around here all the time, we want to build a great city, and we're a part of this city together. Right. And you and I can do that together, and others who are sensitized now, we want to go forward with that. Mm-hmm. But Keith, thank you so much for being willing to put yourself on the line, entered into that discomfort, and because it is, it can be a little bit awkward, but at the same time, I know so many people are just kind of on the edge of their seats listening in, and that's your gift to me, and I think that's your gift to our church, is that you're open to it, you're sensitive to it, and you're gracious enough to be patient with a lot of us who have blind spots more than
Right.
maybe more than the average person.
Right.
We have more blind spots than we should. So thanks everybody, and I want to close this in prayer and just ask God to continue to do a work. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you for Keith, thank you for his life, thank you for who you are, and thank you for what you're doing in our country right now. Even though it's painful, that pain can lead to healing, and I pray it will. I thank you for using Keith. You are using him, and you are speaking through him, and I pray that you'll help us all to listen beyond the headlines, beyond the moment in history that we're in where emotions are high. I pray that once emotions cool, that we'll come down on real and significant answers and show each one of us right now what one step we can take. It may be a conversation, it may be a phone call, maybe a text, could be anything, but I pray that you'll use all of us to impact this tremendous and deeply rooted problem that is in our country. We can see real progress for your sake and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.